So, as the title shows, and no, you are not seeing things. Hello there. I cannot pronounce your name, but hello there. What if Iron Man, or at least Tony Stark, was in Star Wars? The first question, rather, that I think needs to be answered is, what would he be doing in Star Wars? I don't mean what would he be doing there as in, like, why is he in that universe, in that franchise? No. What I mean is, what would his job, what would his life be? If it's prequel era Star Wars, I could imagine Tony being involved in the manufacturing, the engineering of ships. Probably some kind of fighters. Whatever those pre X Wing fighters were. I could see him being probably the inventor of those, or the one who came up with them, or the one who designed and, with obviously a team of probably robots and people, built Jedi fighters. Now, since we could assume that Star Wars would probably take place in the future, right? Like if Tony in the Marvel verse would be considered modern times, then Tony in the Star Wars universe would be considered future times. Prequel and or um you know, original trilogy. This could mean that he has access to even more advanced technology than he would have if he was still living in the Marvelverse. The problem is, though, as we've seen, when you look at the characters who use suits, who use anything even remotely resembling an Iron Man suit, apologies for this sound in the background. Take Jango Fett, for example. I would imagine the Mandalorian armor is considered very advanced. And it has a jetpack. It has a rocket on the back of it. I think it has a wrist mounted flamethrower. But beyond that, the suit itself doesn't have much in the way of weaponry. And it's not going to be nearly as protective as even the first, even the Mark 2 or 3 from the MCU. So would we have to kind of advance the technology in the Star Wars verse more to compensate? Would this mean that Django's Mandalorian suit and the suits that all Mandalorians use, would it mean that those are more advanced than they actually are in the Star Wars franchise? Or would it mean that Tony's armor is much more akin to the Mark One, the bulky suit he built in a cave, and the only advancements he makes with it are to make it smaller in size and improve its weapons when he can. Now, since missiles don't exist for the most part, right? Like your basic firearm is some kind of a blaster. That's laser technology, right? Since your ships all use energy based weapons, although I think some might carry bombs. But, you know, their main artillery is some kind of a laser based weapon, energy based projectile, right? The X Wing Falcon, X Wing fighters, Millennium Falcon, which granted is not in the same timeline as the prequels, but we're of course talking about Star Wars in general here. So I would imagine Tony would probably study battle droids as well as the types of armor used in the creation of starships and fighters. Something that his suit would have in this shall we say crossover would be some kind of energy shielding, invisible energy shielding, right? Remember Queen Amidala's ship that had shields, right? You couldn't see them, but they were some kind of energy shield that could provide protection against attacks. This is something that Tony, in the movies at least, has never had. A shield that's like constantly on. You know what I mean? Like, not a shield that comes from a repulsor or a shield that actually, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he ever has anything in the way of like an energy barrier type shield, which is basically what all ships in Star Wars possess. I would imagine even Jedi fighters would have something in the way of that. But it's hard to imagine what it would look like. The clone army were supposed to be, you know, very advanced in terms of the weaponry they used, the armor they wore, and I believe even the ships that they piloted. Although that may not have been the case. But again, obviously, you know, they were secretly created and trained and prepared for the purposes of being Palpatine's future military. So he would want, you know, the best possible in all areas. So would Iron Man's helmet more or less look like a clone trooper's helmet? Or would it look more akin to the head of a droid? You could almost imagine his helmet looking like a wearable version of C3PO's head, but perhaps bigger for his head to fit into it. The eyes, maybe having more advanced scanning capabilities, and the body, being like a cross between a clone trooper's armor and a droid. It's almost impossible to imagine that, right? Now, there's also another way to look at it. Darth Vader, right? A containment suit was literally built to, keep him alive. And it included a helmet, which obviously did not look like the head of a droid or one of the helmets that the Mandalorians or anyone in Star Wars had. But how much would the shape of Iron Man's suit change to fit in with Star Wars? He may have a sort of breathing area where his mouth would be, just like Darth Vader. We also know that Darth Vader's limbs, being mechanical, are quite strong and drastically increase his physical strength. So, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this is only stated in the novels, and I'm not sure if that's canon anymore, but I think in one of the books it was revealed that Darth Vader's suit is blaster resistant to some extent. So Tony's suit would be blaster resistant too. And he'd probably take it to like a higher level than that. So would his suit be a weird amalgamation of the technology used to build Darth Vader's, a Mandalorian suit, and some concepts taken from fighters and droids. Droideka, for example, they can produce their own shield, right? It's like not a dome, but it surrounds them. I could see him trying to replicate that shield generator. But it's still all very difficult to imagine. If we make it easier on ourselves and say that Tony's suit can more or less be the same as it's always been, just slightly different depending because of the materials and paint jobs, if you will, then we could just imagine Iron Man wearing a suit that looks like it's made out of the same metal that covers Amidala's ship. Maybe even the same color. But that's enough about the suit itself. We'd be here forever talking about that. What's his story? If he was working for um I can't imagine he'd be with the Trade Federation, but depending on where you're born, I mean, I don't know. Are there any humans working for the Trade Federation? I can't remember anyone. Um, he obviously wouldn't be a Jedi or a Sith. Although, if you wanted to make it more interesting and say that he is Force sensitive, sure, but an Iron Man that can also use the Force seems a bit much. So we'll just keep him as, you know, an engineer, and we'll keep him as a scientist, as he always has been, specializing in engineering and in the engineering of like uh, are they called starfighters? I think they're called starfighters. I think that's what an X-wing fighter would specifically be classed as, a starfighter. So yeah, he'd be like the best at um developing, his company rather would be the best at developing starfighters. And we obviously know what happens, right? The Jedi get wiped out in episode 3, more or less, with few survivors. Um, at least a portion of um my memory is so bad when it comes to this. I apologize, people. So I'm just gonna make it more simple on myself and say it like this. Let's just assume that Tony um joins up with what will become the rebellion. He's associated with Padme. He's associated with, the I don't know. Maybe he's from Naboo. And he yeah, he joins in during the war, during the Clone Wars. He joins the side that fights against the Separatists. And ultimately the Empire. Now, another problem would come in the form of if he is around during during the time in which, during the era in which the prequels take place, that would more or less make him as old as Obi-Wan is during the original trilogy. And that shouldn't necessarily be a problem because he's still going to be Iron Man. I mean, I doubt he would be called Iron Man, but he would still be a guy that uses an exosuit, right? An exoskeleton suit. For fighting purposes and whatnot. So it would be even more advanced. But you'd basically have an old man version of Tony Stark in a more advanced techno armor. And I don't know, like, where would he have gone? I mean, would he have joined what was the name of the guy who takes in Leia? I can't remember the guy's name. Would he go to wherever he's located? Was it Alderaan? Would he go there? I mean, even if he is quite chummy with the Jedi, I can't imagine that Tony Stark is going to say, "Hey, Obi-Wan, let me go to Tatooine with you." He could, but I just don't see that. Now let's imagine that Tony's journey here begins with the original trilogy. So he would be, I want to say, around the age of Han Solo. He might even be a fellow smuggler. We can say that his father, Howard Stark, built ships for, um, you know, the side that eventually. I'm so bad with names. What the heck was the name of the group of people that eventually became the rebels? Because the Federalists, or the Trade Federation, were basically under the orders of the Sith, right? But I can't remember what the official name of Amidala and all their people and all their forces were referred to as. I guess just the people of Naboo. Naboo. Anyway, so as not to get too wrapped up in it, we'll say that Howard Stark, he decided to build weapons for the rebels. and then lost his life. I think it only would only make sense for Tony to be on the same planet that Leia was born on. Because for him to be able to build an advanced suit, for him to, still more or less have the same, a similar enough storyline that he does in Marvel, he would need to come from privilege. He would need to come from riches for that kind of education. Um, so I mean, heck, we could even say that he finds his way to the planet that Lando is has a company on, and he becomes like one of his main people. um, but somehow, some way, he's gonna have to become associated with the main cast, right? He's gonna have to meet Han Solo. He's gonna have to meet Luke. He's gonna have to meet, you know. Because when I do these, I don't think about like it's mostly because this is off the cuff. But when I imagine these, I don't think about would um Tony Stark be would he lose his life somehow, right? Like this isn't D&D. This is a what if where most things go well for him, and we're just trying to imagine how he would stack up, and what he would be capable of, and what his role to play would be. I can't imagine him flying around in an Iron Man suit during the attack on the Death Star with all those X-wing fighters. That'd be a bit silly. I mean, even though we see in Iron Man 1 how the Mark 3 can stacks up to fighter jets, like it's able to fly as fast, if not faster than them, right? Even though we do see that, and then of course we see him engage in aerial combat with the Chitauri army. And in Age of Ultron, you obviously see him battling it out in the air there too. So, like, when it comes to flight, it's perfect. But that's not in space. In the comics, he has a suit designed for travel through space. But I just have a hard time believing that they would just be like, okay, they're all gonna attack the Death Star, get in your suit, uh, and ride along, and then once you make it into space, like jump out of the ship and fly along with them in your suit. Like, I just can't see that. Considering Han Solo Lando and many others make it through, not just alive, but, make it out pretty much perfectly fine. I don't think there's any reason to think that Tony Stark wouldn't also make it out just as fine, if not better. Because in the movies, the Force is not that powerful. Like, it is, but it's not the end all be all. Like, even Darth Vader would probably have a difficult time fighting against Iron Man, right? I'm not saying that he wouldn't ultimately win, but I mean, even with the Force, like, and then when you take into consideration the Emperor and Force lightning and all that, like, I mean, heck, even look at the prequels where the Force users seem more impressive than they did in the older movies because, limitations, the time period, differences and changes in filmmaking. Obi-Wan struggles quite a bit against Django. Now, he's nowhere near as powerful as the likes of Dooku, wow. Freudian slip there, people. Sorry about all that. He's nowhere near as powerful as the likes of Darth Tyrannus and Palpatine slash Sidious, as well as, you know, Anakin. But, look at how Mace Windu, well, he does ultimately defeat Django. It's not effortless. I mean, it's mostly effortless, but he still loses his lightsaber and has to, like, pull it back to him. I know that in the expanded universe, there's some kind of lizard that can erect a barrier that nullifies force powers. If we're dealing with the movie universe and not the expanded universe, I don't remember there being any kind of metal that's like somehow force resistant. Um, I mean, in all honesty, there's no reason why Palpatine couldn't just like fling Iron Man around in the air and like slam him into walls, into the walls of his chamber if he really wanted to. Um, but he's not a Jedi, so it wouldn't really make sense for him to come to blows against any force powered individuals. If anything, he'd make the rebels' victory that much easier. Like, even if he isn't with them in space fighting alongside of the X-wing fighters, when he's like fighting, when he's engaged in combat against their enemies on the various planets they travel to, like when Luke and company go up against Jabba, like that. I don't want to say that would be a cakewalk, but Boba Fett's not going to be able to stand up against Iron Man. No way. Um, I can see him and Han Solo butting heads because they are kind of similar. Granted, Han Solo is he's ultimately a good man who doesn't know that he is. But unlike Tony, who never loses that snark, like I'm not trying to say that Han loses that snark, but he does change pretty considerably towards the end of the series, right? Smart mouthed, um, comes off as a jerk, but a lovable jerk. For the record, Han Solo is one of my favorite characters in Star Wars. Um, but he changes a lot. Like the Han Solo that we see in the third film is almost it almost feels like a completely different character because that just goes to show you that he's gone through so much that the old him that was a smuggler is essentially no more. He's truly invested in defeat and helping to defeat the Empire. He's truly invested in standing with the friends he's made. He's an official member of the Rebel Alliance's military, right? He's a general. Um, but Tony, I mean, what would even be the story behind his supposed becoming Iron Man? Again, he wouldn't be called Iron Man in Star Wars. It just wouldn't make sense. I mean, maybe it could because, like, you know how pilots have like a tag name or whatever the name is, code name. Maybe Iron Man could be his code name, but he'd still be known as Tony Stark, right? Um, think Top Gun, right? Maverick and what was the other guy's name? Iceman, right? I think Iceman was one of them. Those aren't their real names. Well, at least Iceman isn't that guy's real name. And I think Goose was another one. So it'd be akin to that. Tony would be, called Iron Man, but when he shows up in the suit, they're not going to say, "Oh, hey, it's Iron Man." No, they're going to say, "Oh, hey, it's Tony." Um, so would there be like a little feud between Han and Tony over who gets to be with Leia? Like, you know what I mean? Would there be like a love triangle? Because I could see her falling for Tony just as easily as she does for Han. Again, there's a lot of similarities between the two. They're both at the beginning lovable scoundrels. But once again, Han becomes more of the conventional hero, whereas Tony stays the same. It's just he's now driven by guilt, right? Like he was never really a bad guy. It's just he's always going to be rough around the edges. He doesn't really lose that. He's just nicer, I guess. And he wants to stand for peace. So in a weird way, I guess he'd be more similar to Lando, because Lando obviously joins the rebellion, but I don't feel like his change is as dramatic, right? There is no like that was the old me, this is the new me with Lando. It's more like I'm with you guys now because I regret my past mistakes and I want to turn over a new leaf and I hate the Empire and I want to get rid of them and blah 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 blah, right? With Han, it's like, oh yeah, the guy that you saw in the first half of the story, that's the old me. The new me is almost nothing like that. And that might be the deciding factor for who Leia ends up with. Because of that change, I wouldn't see her ending up with Tony Stark. And I'm not sitting here trying to suggest that that would happen. It's just for the purposes of conversation. He doesn't even need to end up with someone, necessarily. Um, I can't believe I talked for over 45 minutes about pretty much nothing. I thought I had a good idea for um, a topic, but I just couldn't think of much. Um, so I'll just go for like 15 more minutes. Starting, shall we say, giving a bit of a preview for what I think my next stream is going to be. It will be called What If? It will not What If. From now on, the title for these videos when I do these streams when I do them are going to be called Inserting Tony Stark and then into and then dot dot dot, meaning whatever franchise he's placed into. And that'll be that. The next one I'm thinking of doing will be What If Tony Stark, or inserting Tony Stark into the world of Full Metal Alchemist. Now that is going to potentially be a very interesting discussion. If anyone here has seen Full Metal Alchemist, you might know why I say that. But for those who haven't, I don't want to spoil it. After that one, I think we'll do inserting Tony Stark into... Okay, this would be a really fun one. Inserting Tony Stark into the world of the Terminator franchise. Just imagine Tony Stark fighting alongside of John Connor and the T-800. I think was the name of the Arnold Terminator model. So there's two right there, right? A third one I think we'll do is inserting Tony Stark into why not? The world of Gundam. There are almost limitless possibilities for what you could do with Tony Stark in any of the Gundam series, those worlds. I mean, just imagine an actual Gundam that resembles an Iron Man suit, but with obvious differences to make it look like an actual Gundam. Sorry for the yawn. It might not even be an actual Gundam. It might be a mobile suit, like a unique mobile suit that bears a resemblance to an Iron Man suit. A slight resemblance. When I think of what a mobile suit built by Tony Stark would look like, I'm imagining like a much bigger Hulkbuster combined with War Machine, essentially. So like a Sentinel-sized Hulkbuster with maybe like a different shaped head, probably less bulky looking, and with, you know, visible weapons all over it like War Machine. And there would probably be some kind of like wings attached to it. So that would be fun. So those will be the next 3, which I'll try to plan out better. And for now, I'll just let this be a Q&A for the next however many minutes I go. So please post your questions now, if you have any. Also, please, if you would consider leaving a like on the stream. It really helps a lot. If possible, I'd at least like to get to 1 like for this stream. No questions. No questions. Kind of a bummer. Hey, it is what it is. Today was mostly uneventful. Besides the 2 streams that I did, I was watching stuff on Disney Plus, Marvel-related stuff. I started that one animated Iron Man series. I think it's called Iron Man Armored Adventures. It's it's fine for a show intended for kids, but it lacks some of the maturity that older Marvel cartoons had. Like back when I was growing up, they seemed much more adult. By comparison, and the art style is a bit bleh. It's not necessarily bad. It's just it's kind of I described it as soulless. But the idea of a teenaged Tony Stark becoming Iron Man to me is interesting as a concept. And I totally get why the Iron Man suit in that series does not have any weapons besides the repulsors. Because this is a Tony Stark who has not built weapons. Like, his whole thing is being a hero. His whole thing is inventing things to help people from jump. He doesn't have that past as a weapons manufacturer. So I guess it makes sense why this version of Tony's Iron Man wouldn't have like missiles in it. Although apparently in season 2 he does get missiles and like flamethrowers, which is just very weird. But hey, it is what it is. Maybe that could be another video. I could also do a what if scenario where I don't know how this would work, but what if I was gonna say what if Steve Rogers was Iron Man and what if Tony Stark was Captain America, but I don't think that would work due to the timeline. Like, Tony would have to be born so much earlier, and I don't even remember what age Howard was at that time. So that wouldn't really work, and the technology for Steve to be Iron Man back then wouldn't have existed. Not really, so I don't think that would work, but maybe what could be done is, like, what if Tony Stark was the Hulk and what if Bruce Banner was Iron Man? And then we could also do, and this one has actually somewhat happened in the comics, at least part of it. What if Tony Stark was Sorcerer Supreme and Doctor Strange was Iron Man? We could even do it where Reed Richards is Iron Man and Tony Stark. Well, he wouldn't be Mr. Fantastic, but we'd have to call him something else. Reed Richards. So basically, it would be Reed Richards as Iron Man, still with the Fantastic Four as their leader. And maybe Tony's just along for the ride. Maybe he's a friend. Another one, and I'm just talking to talk at this point. Another one could be, what if okay, this one might not work again due to the timeline, but what if Peter Parker was Iron Man, and what if Tony Stark was Spider-Man? I feel like, in a way, Tony would be a superior Spider-Man to Peter, because I'm not changing anything about their intellect. The only thing I'm doing is changing, like, for lack of a better word, their power sets. This is going to be Tony if he had Spider-Man's powers and upbringing. He's obviously far more intelligent than Peter Parker is. So his Iron Man suit would be a bit... Oh no, what am I talking? Iron Man suit. So, you know, so he's not, you know... His Spider-Man suit would probably be a little bit more advanced than Peter's. And Peter's Iron Man suit would probably be... It probably wouldn't even have weapons on it outside of the repulsors. I mean, it might have, like, non-lethal weapons built into it. But beyond that, I really don't know. Like, that would be kind of fun, though. The irony that Tony Stark became Iron Man because he didn't want to manufacture weapons and he wanted to be, like, a defender of the people and take down, you know, those who were misusing his technology, but still having, like, you know, missiles and weapons on, you know, built into his Iron Man suits. You know, here we have Peter Parker, who's arguably an even more peaceful version of Tony Stark, in an Iron Man suit that has, like, no lethal weapons on board. Can I think of another one? Unfortunately, doing a T'Challa and Tony Stark swap would not work for obvious reasons. Tony Stark becoming Black Panther is no. I shouldn't have even said that. At all. Although, here's another one. What if James Rhodes was Iron Man, and instead of it being Stark Industries, it was Rhodes Industries, and Tony Stark was War Machine? Again, without changing anything about the two characters than their upbringings. That might be the best one yet. Because if Tony Stark, in this scenario, joins the military and ultimately becomes, like, a pilot in the Air Force, and, like, much later on becomes a colonel, Again, he still has his intellect. He's still going to be far smarter than James Rhodes, even though James Rhodes in this scenario went and studied like advanced sciences. There's no reason why Tony in this scenario couldn't still be interested in science and go to college to study engineering and physics. Like, they could both be in school together. Now that would be something. Because then the two of them would basically build Iron Man as a team. Which basically means that War Machine would be more advanced than Iron Man. Or maybe they changed their name. What else can we work with here? Let's do something really crazy. Instead of swapping Marvel characters, instead of swapping Tony with another Marvel character, let's swap him with a character from a completely different company. Or comic line, or whatever, however you want to say it. What if no, it's not going to be swapping Tony with Bruce Wayne. Because I have no idea what I would do with that. Like, I mean, if I did that, see, the thing is, and this would anger a lot of Batman fans, the reality is that Tony is actually much smarter than Bruce. Bruce is an excellent detective, but Tony literally made his bread and butter from developing advanced weaponry for the United States military. Batman was just you know, acquiring gadgets and whatnot to make his role as Batman easier. So, like, Tony Stark's Batwing? Like, his Batman would probably already have the Batman Beyond suit from, like, day one. Um, and if people disagree with what I say here, well, look, I know that Batman is made to be, this super smart dude, but if you compare the technologies that Tony builds compared to the technologies that Bruce builds, they're not even in the same ballpark. Like, Tony's strongest armor, outside of, like, just inserting a bunch of nonsense to make Batman's suit superior because he's part of the Justice League and, he needs to fight superhumans. Outside of that nonsense, like, Iron Man just wrecks him any day of the week. And if we're taking Tony and giving him all of Bruce's martial arts knowledge and detective skills, wow. Like, he might clean up Batman's rogues gallery in, like, an evening. That would be very interesting. Now, there is another one that I just thought of. And it's going to sound very ironic because of the next Avengers movie coming out. What if Tony Stark was Doctor Doom and Victor Von Doom was Iron Man? First off, would it be Dr. Stark instead of Doctor Doom? Doesn't really have the same ring, does it? But Doom literally is Victor's last name. Also, thinking back on the Doctor Strange and Iron Man swap, would it be Dr. Stark? As the Sorcerer Supreme. Again, doesn't really have the same ring. But it's funny to think about. And then when you look at well, I mean, there's no reason why Tony Stark's Mr. Fantastic couldn't still be called Mr. Fantastic. He just wouldn't be as fantastic, because as I understand it, Reed Richards is actually much more intelligent than Tony Stark. Though I have heard that to an extent that's relative. That's due to the fact that's related to the way his powers work. And then I just came up with yet another one. What if Tony Stark was Ant-Man and Hank Pym was Iron Man? You see? The possibilities are endless. But we'll end it right here. So once again, thank you all for joining me for this stream. Second stream of the day. And to those of you who will see this after the fact, please like, comment, and subscribe as always. And as usual, my and as usual, my as usual, it is time to end the stream with my typical outro. But again, not showing my face. Sorry. The truth is, I am Iron Man.